Have you ever heard about a man so corrupt that God didn't let time handle it, didn't give him a chance to turn back, but ended his life with a direct, decisive act? No warning, no negotiation, just the end. If that question gives you chills, that makes sense. Because this is one of those stories that won't let you read the Bible casually. It's dark, it's uncomfortable, and it forces us to ask, how serious is God about sin and spiritual responsibility? But before we dive in, if you like lesser-known Bible stories, the passages people skip over, but that carry razor-sharp truth, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, drop a like, and comment below, what detail shocked you the most? That helps the channel keep going with deeper topics like this. All right, take a deep breath. Today's character appears in Scripture almost only as a single sentence. A sentence so short and cold, it feels like a stamped verdict. His name is Ir, and Ir's ending reminds us of something many people don't want to face. God takes spiritual responsibility seriously, seriously enough to be terrifying. The setting is the era of the patriarchs, before Moses, before the kings, before the prophets, a time when God often interacted with people in very direct ways, through dreams, through encounters in the wilderness, through promises passed down from generation to generation. Abraham received the call, Isaac inherited it, Jacob wrestled with it, and now that promise rests in the hands of Jacob's sons, 12 sons, who will become the 12 tribes, 12 paths but one covenant. Among them is Judah. Judah isn't the firstborn, and he isn't the most impressive on the surface, but he's the one through whom kingship will come the scepter, the authority to rule. Later Jacob will say, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah." In other words, this line will lead to King David and ultimately to the Messiah. But before that promise becomes reality, Judah makes a mistake that a lot of leaders still make today. He separates from his brothers, separates from community. He goes down to Adullam, building friendships and alliances with people who don't know the God of his fathers. And you see how that works, right? When someone drifts away from faith community, they rarely just stay neutral. They find another place to belong. And that new environment reshapes their standards. What used to be a boundary slowly becomes normal. In Adullam, Judah meets the daughter of Shua, a Canaanite, and marries her. It may sound like just a marriage story, but in the covenant context, it's a spiritual turning point. Abraham had emphasized that his descendants shouldn't marry the people of the land, not out of prejudice, but because of faith. The Canaanites worshipped other gods, and their way of life was bound up with idolatry and deeply corrupt practices. Judah knew that, but he chose to ignore it. And from that marriage, a child is born. Judah's firstborn. The name is connected to ideas like awake or watchful, like a guard on duty. Ironically, his life turns out to be the opposite. He doesn't guard his heart, doesn't guard his behavior, and in the end, he can't guard his own fate. Grows up with every advantage: firstborn status, inheritance rights, the face of the next generation. But Scripture keeps making one thing painfully clear. Faith isn't inherited like property. It has to be cultivated, lived out, chosen day after day. And doesn't choose it. When comes of age, Judah arranges a wife for him, Tamar, a name associated with a palm tree, a symbol of uprightness and endurance. Tamar enters Judah's household hoping to build a family that continues the covenant line, but the Bible doesn't describe what Tamar experiences in detail, and that silence makes it even colder, because sometimes God doesn't need to list a person's sins. He says one sentence, and that sentence is enough to tell you this was serious. Scripture says, Judah's firstborn was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. That's it. No long context, no explanation, just the verdict. And that silence is the point. The focus isn't satisfying our curiosity. What exactly did do? The focus is the fact that God saw and God said, "Enough." Over the centuries, people have speculated. Some traditions say refused to father children with Tamar. Others suggest he brought Canaanite practices into the family. Others think he was cruel. But whatever the details were, the core truth remains. Had privilege and position, but he treated what was holy with contempt. And then he dies. Imagine Judah receiving the news. His firstborn is gone. Not in war, not after a long illness, not by accident. Just gone. Because God decided it. The Bible doesn't linger on the funeral. Heaven is silent. And the family line is cut off right where it was supposed to begin. But in the ancient world, there was still a path to keep a dead man's name from being erased. Levirate marriage? The brother would marry the widow and raise up offspring in the name of the dead brother, so the line wouldn't end. And this is where the story gets even more intense, because Judah still has a second son. His name is Onan. Judah calls Onan and speaks bluntly, almost like a command. Go into your brother's wife and perform your duty. This isn't a suggestion. It's a responsibility in their tradition, so that the dead brother's name wouldn't disappear. Onan hears it, and he agrees, but only on the surface. You know that kind of person who says yes with their mouth, but already has a plan to dodge it. Someone who does the right thing in appearance so they won't be blamed, while secretly destroying the real purpose. That's Onan. He goes to Tamar, living as if he's doing what's right, but he deliberately prevents her from becoming pregnant. Because Onan understands perfectly, if Tamar has a child, that child will be counted as heirs, and it will inherit Er's portion, which means Onan loses leverage, loses position, loses advantage. So Onan chooses a strategy that lets him take the benefit while avoiding the responsibility. He claims the rights of a man while cutting off the duty the covenant expects. It isn't just selfish, it's cruel. Because for Tamar, this isn't a power game. It's her future, her status, her survival. But Onan forgets something. He can fool people, but he can't fool God. Scripture again gives a short, cold, decisive line. What Onan did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord also put Onan to death. Again, two brothers, two deaths, two judgments from heaven. And now nobody can say, that's just bad luck. No, this is a clear sign that something in Judah's household is deeply wrong. Wrong enough for God to intervene directly. And what about Tamar? She becomes a widow, a second time. No children, no protection, no explanation, no easy way to claim justice the way we might today. And in ancient society, a woman like that could quickly be viewed as unlucky, as if she were the cause of everything. But notice, Tamar isn't the source of the tragedy. She's the one being crushed by a tragedy created by others. At this point, Judah still has one son left, Shelah. But Shelah is young, and instead of defending what's right, instead of facing the real issue, Judah lets fear control him. He tells Tamar, go back to your father's house and stay there as a widow until Shelah grows up. Sounds reasonable, except Scripture shows us the painful truth. It's a hollow promise. Judah says it to calm the situation, to push Tamar out of his house, but in his heart he doesn't intend to give Shelah to her. He's afraid. He looks at Tamar and thinks, what if my third son dies too? Instead of asking, what did my sons do? What is wrong in my house? He chooses the easiest path, dump his fear onto a powerless woman, and Tamar is left suspended with no way forward. She goes back to her father's house. She waits, year after year. Picture it, Tamar in mourning clothes, living like a widow, unable to remarry, unable to move on, and unable to return to Judah's household as promised. A life hanging between a past she can't undo and a future that never arrives. Meanwhile, Judah goes on with his life. His wife dies. He mourns. But time passes. Grief fades, and one day Judah travels to Timnah for the sheep shearing, typically a festive season. Food, gatherings, and sometimes moral looseness because people treat it like a celebration. Tamar hears the news, and this is the turning point. Tamar realizes Shelah is grown, but Judah still hasn't kept his word. If she keeps obediently waiting, she'll die in silence. Name will vanish, and what the covenant was supposed to protect will be suffocated by betrayal and cowardice. So Tamar makes a bold decision, one that shocks many readers. She takes off her widow's clothes, she covers her face with a veil, and she positions herself on the road at Enaim, where Judah will pass. Tamar knows what she's doing. She knows the risk. She knows the cost. But she also knows this. The plan is being destroyed by the very people who were supposed to protect it. Judah passes by. He sees a veiled woman. He doesn't recognize his daughter-in-law. And in a moment where desire overrules wisdom, Judah approaches her and says something unmistakably blunt. "Let me come in to you." Tamar doesn't respond with emotion. She responds with a question like a business deal. "What will you give me?" Judah says, "I'll send you a young goat from my flock." But Tamar doesn't trust a promise like that. She asks for collateral. "Then what will you leave as a pledge?" And Judah gives her 3 items, his seal, his cord, and his staff. Those aren't random objects. They're basically his identity, like a signature, an official stamp, and a personal emblem of authority. In other words, Tamar now holds proof Judah can't deny. They are together, and Tamar conceives. Afterward, Tamar leaves, returns home, and puts her widow's clothes back on as if nothing happened. Judah, true to his word, sends the young goat to reclaim his pledge. But when his messenger searches for the veiled woman at Enaim, nobody knows her. Nobody saw her. Nobody heard of her. It's like she never existed. Judah is confused, but he doesn't want the story spreading. He basically says, "Forget it," and he lets it go. 3 months later, a rumor hits like lightning. Tamar, your daughter-in-law, is pregnant. And guess how Judah reacts? Not, "What happened?" Not, "Who did this?" Not even, "Where did I fail by breaking my promise?" Instead, immediate rage and moral judgment. "Bring her out, burn her." Do you see the contradiction? The man who sinned in the shadows becomes the loudest judge in the light. It's one of the most realistic pictures of sin. When people won't face their own darkness, they often pour their outrage onto others to feel righteous. Tamar is brought out. Everything is about to end in fire. But at that moment, Tamar produces the 3 items, the seal, the cord, the staff, and she says one sentence, no screaming, no begging, just raw truth. "I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong." No argument needed, no long speech, just proof. Judah sees it, and he freezes. And for the first time in this story, Judah says something right. "She is more righteous than me." What does that mean? It means Judah realizes he's the one who broke his word. He's the one who trapped Tamar in a dead end. He's the one who put the covenant line at risk. And the woman despised, blamed, nearly burned alive, is the one who acted so that what was right wouldn't be buried. The verdict flips. The crowd falls silent. The man who judged now has to face himself. And Tamar, who was about to die, is vindicated in front of everyone. And then we reach the biggest twist. Tamar is carrying twins. Scripture says that during childbirth, the twins seem to compete for who comes out first. One baby reaches out a hand first, and the midwife ties a scarlet thread around it to mark the first. But then that hand pulls back in, and the other baby breaks through first, like a sudden overtake. So the one who comes out first is named Perez, meaning breakthrough, bursting out, breaking through. The other is named Zerah, associated with brightness and with the scarlet mark. Do you see the symbolism? In a family full of disorder, sin, betrayal, selfishness, hypocrisy, there's still a breakthrough where life comes out. As if God is saying humans can break everything, but they can't lock my hands. Now we return to the central question. Why did God kill Why is a man who appears so briefly recorded in such a heavy way? The answer isn't in satisfying curiosity. What exactly did do? The answer is in the bigger picture. God protects his covenant and his purpose, even when humans keep trying to destroy it. So let me pull the message together clearly. First, death warns us there is a limit point to corruption. Scripture says was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. One sentence, but it forces a pause. It shows that some sins aren't just wrong by society's standards. They profane what is holy by God's standards. Some actions might be hidden, unprovable, or even excused by people, but heaven sees them clearly. And when Scripture records a case where God directly ends a life, it's like a giant road sign. Don't assume he's indifferent. Matters here because he isn't just anyone. He's Judah's firstborn tied to the line where kingship will come. His role isn't only family role. It's a role in the covenant storyline. If corruption enters at that connection point, the damage doesn't stay personal. It threatens something bigger. And God doesn't let it slide. Second, Onan clarifies the nature of the sin, crushing spiritual duty to protect personal gain. Onan doesn't rebel publicly. He still goes to Tamar. He still plays the part, but he deliberately ruins the purpose. He prevents offspring, erases Er's name, and secures inheritance for himself. That's a refined kind of evil, outwardly acceptable, inwardly rotten, and God calls it wicked. This hits a modern nerve. People wanting power without duty, wanting benefit without responsibility, wanting status without cost. And Scripture shows that kind of living doesn't just harm the person doing it, destroys others too. Tamar is the evidence. Third, Judah is the picture of responsibility avoided and morality used as a weapon. Judah promises Tamar, "Wait until Shelah grows up." But he's afraid, so he doesn't intend to keep his word. He traps Tamar in permanent widowhood, no right to remarry, no future, no protection. Then when Tamar becomes pregnant, Judah doesn't investigate truth or revisit his own failure. He launches moral outrage. Only when proof appears does the hypocrisy collapse, and Judah admits, "She is more righteous than me." Fourth, Tamar isn't a side character. She keeps the line from dying. In this story, the most determined person to see it through isn't a man in Judah's household. It's a woman with no power and no voice. Tamar acts because without a child she is erased, and Er's name is erased. In covenant context, that's a severe break. Her action is bold, even controversial, but the story doesn't end with her condemnation. It ends with her vindication and with the covenant line continuing through her. Fifth, the greatest shock. The Messiah's line passes through this messy story. Perez doesn't disappear. Perez becomes a key link leading to King David and ultimately to Jesus in the New Testament genealogy. Meaning, God doesn't erase this embarrassing story from history. He doesn't hide it. He leaves it there like a scar, and that scar becomes a place where grace is visible. Humans stain it. Humans shatter it. Humans distort it. But God still breaks through, like Perez, to bring history back to his intended path. Closing. So why did God kill Scripture doesn't give a detailed list of Er's sins, but it gives enough context and outcome to understand the message. Represents a covenant connection point, yet he lives corruptly before God. Onan represents selfishness that destroys spiritual duty, and he is judged as well. Judah represents avoidance and hypocrisy, and he is exposed. Tamar represents the powerless one who refuses to let the line be cut off. And in the end, God turns a story full of stains into a road that leads to redemption. If there's one message running through all of this, it's God is serious about sin and spiritual responsibility. and he is powerful enough to turn human wreckage into part of the redemption story. So here's the question to end the video. Who do you see yourself most in Genesis 38, Onan, Judah, or Tamar? And what part of this story is convicting you the most? If you want, in the next video we can go deeper. Why the genealogy of Jesus intentionally includes names like Tamar, and what that says about grace, truth, and the way God works through the very things people try to hide. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.